You're listening to Natural AF, half Australian, half American, all natural. This is a show where we dive into what it means to reconnect to nature, our natural state of being, and who we truly are. And we are your two hosts. I'm Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
In this particular episode, we're going to dive into the psyche, into dark forces, the whole psychological establishment through the pharmaceuticals and pharmakia that they do, and get to know what's really going on with our guest, Jerry Marzinsky. If you haven't heard of Jerry Marzinsky, you're in for a treat. This is an amazing honor to have him on the show. And his level of experience, like, it's super rare. I get the feeling that there's maybe 3 or 4 other people like him in the world who've done the work that he's doing for as long as he's been doing it. It's just super fascinating. If you're into abnormal psychology, you want to hear some of these stories. He's got heaps of good ones. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, this is definitely abnormal for the mainstream. So it's interesting because you saying that about, he's probably one of the only guys in the world doing this. I feel like this is very ancient knowledge. Again, we're very much coming back into this, more of this ancient knowledge that I think way back when, ancient civilizations and more tribal communities, they knew this stuff. They knew that when people were mentally unwell, that there were, dark entities, demonic entities, whatever you want to call them, at play. And I think because of the current timeline that we're living on and, everything that's sort of happened in the Western world and the way that medicine has become as mainstream as it has, or Western medicine, this knowledge has been very occulted for a really long time. And, thank God for people like Jerry that, he's such a pioneer in this field. And I actually love that he's got the background that he does.
You're right. I think this is old knowledge. Like a lot of the ancient Sufi wisdom and mystics and all that stuff talk about different demons and different entities and things like that. But outside of the mystical, there's not been a lot of crossover into the realms of like the people that actually deal with the people that are insane and committing violent crimes. So it's really, really cool to see someone from his perspective. I don't know. It's just such a testimony of one, his humility in the way that he operates. He's like, he just assumes that there's stuff that he doesn't know and is humble enough to question and learn. That's what we're doing. That's what this whole podcast is. That's the way we've approached life, and it's freeing and humbling. But because of that humility, that is the key. Sometimes that opens up the realm of more knowledge. If you go to it with this quest for power, I feel like you're energetically blocked, and it's probably one of the reasons why more people don't see this kind of thing.
I'm so curious to know Jerry's human design. After listening to him, I was like, he has got to have a one line. The one line is the investigator, and man, is he an investigator, especially, for those who haven't heard Jerry Marzinsky before, man, he's got some stories. Like, buckle up, you're in for a wild ride.
We mentioned his book in here, but we'll say the name of it now because we didn't really spell it out very clearly for you. Alexa will go ahead and read that.
So it's called An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower. So I think Jerry showed it in the video. If you're watching, you'll see it at the end, but I don't think we mentioned it. Well, we can't wait to get our hands on that book. I can't wait to have a read. Even though we've chatted to Jerry, I'm sure there's so much more in the book that we didn't talk about. So highly recommend checking that out. Check out his website as well. There's lots of articles. There's so much on his website. So if this is fascinating for you, definitely head there. There's so much more to see.
Yeah. And this gives me hope because there's a lot of crazies in the world, and he's dived into something that I'm excited to get into and learn more about, the MACE method, which we'll talk about towards the end. So stick around for that.
Before we get into the episode, we've got just a few days left of our buy one, get one 50% off sale for the deodorants that is now available in the US and worldwide. So make sure you take advantage of that before it ends. Head to naturalartform.com. And while you're there, join the mailing list if you haven't already, because that's always the first place where we launch new products. You get the latest updates and you'll stay in the know.
So Refresh deodorant is a different take on natural deodorants. It's a pumpable lotion. It's very magnesium and antioxidant rich. We use a specific form of magnesium called hexahydrate, and that is the most gentle topical form of magnesium. It's also the most absorbable. So it absorbs into your body pretty quickly. It doesn't leave a residue on the clothes. And that combined with calendula are very, very antimicrobial. So it actually will reverse body odor. And I kind of discovered it by accident because that's what I use in Alleviate, which is our pain relief remedy. And I went camping one time for a few days without bringing deodorant in the summer, and as you can imagine, without showering for a few days, became pretty ripe. And surprisingly, it actually reversed that body odor in spite of me being outside and hot and sweating and all that. So it's just good because men like me that work on roofs or, build stuff or work with our hands, sometimes we're not really convinced that the natural stuff can work. So this stuff does. Other people like me have tried it. 2 thumbs up. So
yeah, we've got a lot of men coming back for more deodorant at the markets, which is a good sign. If it works, for me, if it works for the men and they're coming back for more, then it really works.
Yeah. Speaks for itself. So check it out. Grab yours. Try one of each scent. We've got Forest and Calm. Calm it's still unisex, but it's more like rosewood, lavender, lemongrass, and works really well. It doubles as a sleep lotion because it's so magnesium rich, and magnesium will help you relax before bedtime. But if you use it during the day as a deodorant, it'll also just help your body buffer the stress and, the strain of just living and working and going to the gym or whatever. So really important to have as a daily ritual. We are going to be doing a booth at the Living Free Festival in Australia.
In Australia, we call it a stall. But for Isaac, we call it a booth.
Yeah, we have a booth.
All you need to know is we're going to be at the Living Free Festival. It's just a few weeks away now, which is wild. I can't believe how close it is. So not only is Natural Art Form going to be there with our stall, Isaac's going to be co-emceeing, and I'm going to be doing a workshop on aligning the unconscious mind. So we are so pumped to be there this year. It's going to be lots of fun. If you want to get your hands on some discounted tickets, head to our Linktree. There's a link to the website where you can purchase tickets, and our code NaturalAF will get you a sweet discount on all ranges of tickets.
Yes, come join the fam if you haven't been there. Last year was phenomenal. It reminded me of like the Bear Event, the Bear Fest, and the meetups we used to have when I was living in Colorado or near Colorado. We had this saying, it's like meeting old friends for the first time. It's kind of like a soul family gathering, and it was so much fun. We learned a lot from the different guests and speakers that were there, and made more friends. Todd, who we've had on the podcast, we got to see him present there last year. So you just never know what's gonna spark your interest. There's so much to offer for all types of people, including kids. This year is going to be much more. There's going to be a lot more events and stuff focused on for the kids, and that's going to be so much fun and so cool to see. And that's what really is the way through all of this, is building community, getting together, growing your families around trustworthy people. Supporting each other's businesses is super important. Keeping the economy inside the high trust circle, so to speak. Like that's the way forward, people. I'm telling you, it's so much power in that. And we're just honored to be a part of that. So Come check it out. Come hang with us, say hi, and bring your friends, tell your family members. It's a good time.
Can't wait.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Jerry Marzinsky is a retired licensed psychotherapist with over 35 years of experience working with and studying the thought processes of psychotic and criminally insane patients in some of the most volatile psychiatric institutions in the United States. Over decades working in prisons, hospitals, and crisis units, he discovered contradictions between mainstream psychiatric teachings and what he observed in schizophrenic patients. His investigations led to non-pharmaceutical methods that in some cases resulted in complete remission, challenging the psychiatric establishment's belief that schizophrenia is incurable. Now retired, Jerry continues his work as a certified MACE practitioner and speaks openly about his findings and the systemic failures of modern mental health care.
It's such an honor to have you on the show, Jerry. I've had a few people that I know that have talked to you. Owen Benjamin was one, and a friend of mine, Patrick. Yeah. Patrick is a wildland firefighter and medic up in Montana. I don't know if you remember him. I forget his last name.
Both of those guys.
Yeah. Good friends. And everything you've talked about is very interesting. I think it's extremely timely. It's something we've had experiences with, some of it with different like entities and things like that. It's very curious, and I'm interested to see how you've gone about fixing and correcting some of this and combating this, and what your thoughts are now after years of dealing with this. But before we get into that, I think it'd be great to get just a little bit of a background, a little bit of a history. Like, how did you get into psychotherapy? What drew you to that? And then what drew you to like the prisons? Because that's like That's heavy shit.
Well, it was a lot of it was, I guess you call it serendipity. You
Mm.
know, I didn't go, oh yeah, I always wanted to work in a prison. That didn't that didn't
Right.
cross my mind. You know, what I ended up with was I was working in one of the biggest mental health clinics here in Tucson as a therapist there, but their funding was not solid. Okay, so the first time they cut back on the hours, I went, okay, I can't deal with this. It's too unstable. And I had some friends who were working in the prison. They knew me, and they kind of talked me into applying. And they knew the chief psychologist out there, and I was well qualified, so I was hired there a long time ago. It must be close to 30 years now.
Wow.
That was where I was able to do the best research because after I got out of graduate school, I got a job at the probably the largest psychiatric hospital on the planet. It was in central Georgia. There were 10,000 patients there when I got there, down from 23 or something like that. There was every
Jeez.
every kind of mental illness known to man there. I think I got interested in mental illness when I took my first abnormal psychology class. You know, and here were all these things going wrong with the human mind, and there wasn't anything in that class or in the book about what was causing this. All they were was very detailed descriptions of each of these different mental illnesses, you know, and what they looked like and what the behavioral symptoms were. But there was nothing there about what caused it. You know, it was there weren't any answers. So, you know, I think like a lot of people in psychology, I came out of, my father was a rageaholic. He was fairly violent, unstable. I didn't much appreciate it at the time, but after 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of higher education in psychology and counseling, there was no better training for what I was going into than being raised by that sucker. You know, it was like,
Wow.
you know, I'd be face to face with you know, some of these very violent criminals, and I lived it. You know, so it's like for me it was normal, and I'd go, well, okay, what else you got? You know.
Wow.
The other thing that helped is I was a adrenaline junkie, so that helped a great deal. I can't emphasize how much that helped. I mean, because there were several times where things happened that just absolutely just blew my mind. I mean, I just went into shock.
Wow. Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought this up because I actually really did want to ask you, like, what were some of the more either dangerous or just more extreme experiences you had with some of the prisoners that you worked with? Were they all schizophrenic or were they varying degrees of mental illness?
No, they were varying degrees of mental illness. But you know, when I was working at the big state hospital in Milledgeville, I was working for the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, and our job was to get the highest functioning patients in that state hospital and train them in a job skill, you know, like auto mechanics or janitorial services or barber or butologist. You know, they were kind of semi-skilled workers.
Yeah.
And get them out of the hospital. But what I noticed is that the highest functioning were usually the schizophrenics, the ones that were supposedly clinically crazy.
Okay.
So I had no idea what was going on with them. I mean, I saw they sabotaged themselves. They didn't teach us hardly anything about schizophrenia in undergraduate or graduate school. They go, oh, well, it's a break from reality, you know, our reality.
Yeah.
They say there were auditory and visual hallucinations, but there wasn't any real information about what these people were like. You know, it was what are they thinking? What are they doing? Nothing. And there was no way for a student to get access to a clinical population. You can't do it.
Yeah.
Even researchers can't do it. If a PhD in psychology said, "Hey, I want to do some research on schizophrenics at the state hospital," they wouldn't get in. They'd say,
Right.
"Oh, we can't allow that. It's too dangerous." Or there's the insurance won't allow it, or you don't have the training, or there's no way to access it. There's no way to get there. You can't get into a mental health clinic and study a particular type of population.
Yeah.
They just won't. They won't allow it to happen.
Mm.
So really, the only way to really get in there was the way I did, and I had no idea that I was going to be doing research in there. I was just curious. I mean, why is this happening? Why are schizophrenics sabotaging themselves as they approach succeeding at any of these classes they were taking? It didn't make any sense. So I knew they were all hearing voices, so the voices are, they call them auditory hallucinations, despite the fact that they haven't done any research on them at all, none. It's like the psychiatric mafia just gets up there and go. It reminds me of the old Egyptian priests of old, where they just get up there and go, "We hereby proclaim that these things are hallucinations because we said so."
Yeah.
And we're the head honchos of mental health. Nobody questions us. We're the highest trained in the mental health industry. On and on and on.
Yeah.
But the whole entire time, close to 45 years, I've been working on the front lines of mental health. I haven't ever seen a researcher on the front lines of mental health anywhere. Nowhere.
Yeah.
They're
So
not
what are they
allowed
researching?
all these mental illnesses.
Yeah.
Getting access to the actual people that are suffering from these things, and to ask them questions. What's going on with you?
Yeah.
Why is this? How does this manifest itself? What are the voices is the biggest one. So despite the fact that the voices that paranoid schizophrenics hear is the chief symptom of paranoid schizophrenia, it's the biggest one.
Yeah.
None of those suckers are asking any questions about what the voices are. They're teaching in the universities that these are auditory hallucinations. In the undergraduate and graduate program, auditory hallucinations. So, what I thought was, when they're saying auditory hallucinations, I was thinking like word cabbage, or word salad, just babble, like it doesn't make any sense, because hallucinations don't make any sense. They're all over the place. They're random. They're all over the place. So, once I got onto the front lines, there was nothing I went through in undergraduate or graduate school prepared me for being in this giant psychiatric hospital. Surrounded, it was a vast sea of mental illness surrounding us. It was like,
Well, is it just auditory hallucinations, or do some of these have like visuals as well, quote unquote
they're visual
hallucination as
They
well?
call them auditory and visual hallucinations, but the visual ones are much less prevalent than the auditory.
Yeah.
Okay.
The auditory is the main symptom. So you'd think if this was the main symptom of paranoid schizophrenia, they'd want to study it. They'd want to know something about it, other than just saying, "Hey, they're hallucinations."
So what were some of the experiences you started having, Jerry, that made you realize that schizophrenia wasn't what the medical system was telling people it was?
Well, that came piece by piece. I guess one of the first ones I could think of was as an undergraduate in abnormal psychology. The professor had us read a paper saying that if two psychotics met each other, if they both thought they were Trudeau, one of them would have to change to something else. They'd have to change their hallucination to something else. And even as an undergraduate, I'm going, well, why would they have to do that? They're both nuts. Why would one care if the other one was, It didn't make any sense to me. But I had no access to a clinical population. So there was no way to check that kind of stuff out.
Yeah.
You know, and there's all kinds of garbage like that. That if you had access to a clinical population, you could go in there and look and see for yourself. But there was no access. You know? They wouldn't let people in the prison to study anything. They wouldn't let them in the private psychiatric hospitals. The risk management would turn them down. They weren't studying the front line. What they were studying was whatever these universities wanted to spit out. You know, and the universities are controlled by Big Pharma, and they have been since 1910 when the Carnegie Foundation took over the universities.
1910. Is that when they started closing down? Remember they used to have all those big mental hospitals? It was like all over the world.
That shutdown started in California as a tax rebellion, Proposition 13.
Oh, okay.
Right? So they had all these big hospitals, and so they were going, oh well, this is just too expensive. You know, we have to shut it down. So they made up this bullcrap about, oh yeah, the mentally ill need to be around a more normal population instead of being stuck in here with all these mentally ill. They need to be out in the community with sane people. You know?
Right.
But there wasn't anything like, well, how are they going to support themselves? They can't work. They're crazy. You know, where are they going to stay? You know, who's going to take care of them? Where are they going to get food? Where are they going to get their medications? So they started this propaganda about, well, we're going to open up more mental health centers. Right? They opened up a few more, but schizophrenics didn't even take their medications when they were handed them to them in the state hospital face to face. You know, the nurse would come around, here, take these things, right? And they'd stick them under their tongue and wait till the nurse passed, and then they'd spit them out in the toilet, you know, or somewhere else. So the first time that dawned on me was, well, let me finish the story about the two guys being crazy. Okay, and then I'll go to this other one. You know, fast forward about 10 years. By then, I was out of graduate school. I was working at the state hospital in a psychiatric unit, and I was doing rounds in the morning. And here's a maintenance man cutting the cap off of a stairwell banister. Okay, so this banister went up to the second floor of this psychiatric unit, and I knew the top of that banister on the second floor did not have a cap, and I just found that odd because all the other banisters had a cap, you know, at both ends. So here was a maintenance man with a grinder wheel cutting off the bottom end of this banister. And here's sparks flying all over the place and smoke, and it was it's the most exciting thing going on at the time. And here's this bunch of patients standing there watching the show. So I just joined them, and we're all standing there watching the sparks fly, and, you know, kind of like it was a mini 4th of July. And then when that cap fell off of that banister, I got the shock of my life. Thousands of pills, psychiatric pills, came pouring out of that banister like Niagara Falls.
Oh my gosh.
Coming out of there were thousands of them. They just went all over the floor, and I'm just like, what's with this? You know, it's like each pill is a vote for these guys to stay crazy. Why is that happening?
Yeah.
You know, what is going on here? And it just blew my mind. And I'm looking at these things, and they were all kinds of colors. They were moving all over the floor and dancing all over. And bent over and picked a few up, and most of them were antipsychotic drugs.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Why are they doing that? Why are they choosing to be nuts? It just blew my mind. It was like, I still remember that like it was yesterday. You know?
Man, it's like, I wonder how much money was in that of pharmaceuticals. Probably like a couple 100,000 of pills.
Lots of money.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that was a big question. It's like, why? Why is this? Why are they spitting out their meds? You know? So it's like I didn't know. And I just carried around. But back to the story of the abnormal psychology class where the clinical psychologist wrote this paper saying if two crazy guys had the same delusion, one of them would have to give way. So I was doing my rounds on the second floor of the same unit. And here's this, what I was noticing was that a a lot of these schizophrenics were carrying on coherent conversations with something or someone I couldn't see. They were arguing with them. They were carrying on coherent conversations. It wasn't word salad like I had thought, from reading, the material in graduate school and undergraduate school where, oh yeah, these are visual hallucinations. I've seen hallucinations. They're all over the place. Some are positive, some are negative, some are neutral. They're just all over the place. There's no predicting them. But here these guys are carrying on long, coherent conversations with someone or something that I couldn't see. And they were arguing with them in some cases. There was one lady who, she was outside on the hospital grounds, and she's arguing with her voices that she did not want to leave the hospital grounds. And in the meantime, she was walking off the hospital grounds as she was arguing with somebody that she didn't want to leave the hospital grounds. As she proceeded to walk off the hospital grounds. So I saw this guy, and he was carrying on a conversation with something. And I got around behind him, and I kind of crept up behind him. So I was trying to get close enough so I could hear what he was saying. And when I got close enough, he turned around and he caught me. And I said, I haven't seen you before. I said, I'm Jerry. I'm the psych for this unit. I haven't seen you before. What's your name? And he turns around and he looks me in the eye and he goes, I'm Jesus Christ. And I think, okay. And I look him in the eye and I go, no, you can't be Jesus Christ because I am. So I'm like, okay, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna change into Trudeau, or is he gonna change into something else?
Yeah.
And I'm waiting there on pins and needles to see what he's gonna do. And he cocks up his eyes and he goes, thinks about it a minute, and then he looks at me and goes, okay, we can both be Jesus Christ. And then he strolls off. And I'm like, okay, what else did they lie to me about?
Yeah.
So that's the first one. And I didn't trust authority as far as I could throw them. Raised with my dad, I didn't trust authority. I didn't trust it. And there were other things that happened to me where I just didn't trust authority. So I'm like, okay, they lied. This was a blatant lie. They're teaching it in graduate and in college. It's in this abnormal psychology thing. What else are they lying about? And things didn't make a lot of sense. A lot of things. Once I got onto the front lines where you could actually see what was going on, one of the other things that came up fairly quickly was what they're teaching in undergraduate, graduate, and the PhD program is that mental illness, especially schizophrenia, is due to a chemical brain imbalance, a chemical imbalance in the brain. Okay, and I believe that. After I got out of graduate school, that's what they were teaching. I didn't have access to any other proof other than what they were saying in the books. But then I noticed something, fairly odd. When I was sitting through some of these diagnostic sessions with psychiatry with my patients, I was watching what they were doing, and they just asked the patient a few questions. They'd say, well, I'm hearing voices, I'm not sleeping well, handful of questions, and then the psychiatrist will, okay, you're schizophrenic. And then they go, okay, we're going to start you on this drug and this drug and this drug. And it was like, I watched that several times over, and after a while I got to thinking, well, if this is a chemical imbalance of the brain, how come they're not looking for a baseline? How come they're not giving them, lab tests or blood tests or some kind of objective test to see what chemicals in the brain are out of balance and by how much? It's just not happening. It's not happening with any of them.
None.
And I'm sitting through session after session after session where they're diagnosing these people with these different mental illnesses, and there's no lab tests to determine what's out of balance or by how much, but they're teaching in all the graduate schools and all the undergraduate schools and master's degree, this is, mental illness is a chemical imbalance of the brain. Well, if so, what's out of balance and by how much? There's 23 different neurotransmitters in the brain, which are out of balance by how much? I finally asked one of the psychiatrists, I said, how are you determining what's out of balance when you're not giving any kind of blood test or any kind of objective test whatsoever? And he goes, oh, we let the pharmacology or the pharmacologists do that. They just recommend what these medicines are used for, and they've done all that research. And I'm going, what? That's like letting the fox in the hen house, for crying out loud. And they're believing that this is a chemical imbalance too. Why aren't they asking the same questions? Just because they deem it a certain class of behavior, that's got nothing to do with the biochemistry of anything.
Yeah.
The DSM is just a class of different behaviors, and they're not cut and dried like they make it look in the DSM. They bleed into one another all the time, and there may be 2 or 3 different ones at the same time. It's not cut and dried. It's not like a dictionary,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And half of them were probably invented in that psych unit, that massive psych unit in Georgia. I've been to Georgia. I trained there in the Army, and
where?
it makes sense why they'd put the biggest one there.
That's where Central State Hospital was.
Yeah.
That's where the hospital I worked was.
It makes sense that that's where they'd put the biggest one. That's, Georgia's a bit of a crazy place.
They had plenty of them there. I found out later that not only did they not know what the chemical balance of the brain actually is, they had no test whatsoever to test for what was out of balance or by how much.
Yeah.
This was made up by, here it is here. It was not until the late 1980s. This chemical imbalance thing was made up by a drug company to sell their drugs called Eli Lilly.
Yeah.
It was not until the late 1980s, after the release of the landmark antidepressant Prozac, that the idea of the chemical balance hit the psychiatric mainstream. As the psychiatrist Peter Brigham, 1991, points out in his book Toxic Psychiatry, you want to see how slimy these people are. Get that book, Toxic Psychiatry. He said the drug company Eli Lilly advanced the chemical imbalance theory as a marketing scheme to sell their new drug Prozac. They needed some explanation for why it worked. So they came up with this chemical imbalance crap. They knew at the time it was a lie. There was, of course, no demonstrable evidence showing that depressed patients had any imbalance, but Lilly ran with it. Before long, psychiatrists and psychiatric patients alike came to identify with the idea that mental disorders are caused by chemical imbalances in the brain. It's a complete lie.
Yeah. Well, I studied holistic nutrition almost 10 years ago now. And what I found, and mind you, by the time I'd gone into study, because I was actually diagnosed with bipolar 2 when I was about 24. And of course, a psychiatrist diagnosed me. And the first thing he said is, well, this is the drug we prescribe and you'd basically be on it for the rest of your life. And I was like, no, thanks. I was like, drugs are a last resort for me. I said, I'm going to do this the natural way. And I did. I cleaned up my diet. I prioritized exercise. I cleaned up my lifestyle a lot and never been affected by it again. And then I went on to study nutrition. And so we learn biology, biochemistry. And when you look at a lot of these, chemicals that they're talking about, so serotonin, dopamine, actually what they found now in the last sort of 10 to 15 years, what research is showing is that a lot of those neurotransmitters are actually created by the gut bacteria in the gut and then sent to other parts of the body. And so the health of your gut microbiome is actually way more relevant to quote unquote mental health than what's going on in the brain. So that's just on the physical side, because as we now know, what we've learned a lot from listening to your prior interviews, Jerry, is that it's so much more than just the physical side, mental health. There's sort of like these spiritual and energetic things going on in the background. So what was the turning point for you when you started to realize that this isn't even really physical what's going on in these schizophrenic patients?
Well, that was after I discovered several other lies. So I had to get past the lies first.
Yeah.
So the chemical imbalance was a big lie. There's here's Jeffrey Lee. This is a psychiatrist, and I think that the neurotransmitter you're talking about was serotonin. He says there's not a single peer-reviewed article that can be accurately cited to directly support claims of serotonin's deficiency in any mental disorder. This is what the antidepressant Big Pharma was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of evidence against it, So
Mm.
another friggin' lie.
Yeah.
So someone could be depressed and have normal serotonin levels, like
Yes.
potentially. Yeah.
So what they were saying was their drug, that one I just mentioned, I forgot.
Prozac.
Prozac, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Prozac. And I think even on that they have labeled it may cause suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's
So
I was diagnosed with clinical depression at like 16, and the same thing, went to the doctor, and I had gone with my mum, but then I had done my, they assess you and stuff. I had done that privately just with the doctor alone. And when because my mum had said, like, we're not going to do antidepressants or anything like that. But then when I was alone with the doctor, she asked me, and I was like, oh, not really. And at that time, Lexapro had just hit the market. It was a new antidepressant drug. And she gave me like a sample pack of it to take home. And of course, I took it home, gave it to my mum. My mum looked up the packet insert straight away. And that was one of the first side effects that was listed with suicidal ideation. My mum was like, why on earth would I give my teenage daughter who's depressed a drug that could potentially give her like suicidal thoughts? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
right. And a lot of people are killing themselves. I mean, that's why they had to put it on there.
Yeah.
Right? So I saw what you saw too, where they just diagnose these people, especially schizophrenics, and say, this is a life sentence.
Yeah.
You've got to take these toxic drugs for the rest of your life. And they hated those drugs. I mean, they absolutely hated those drugs. So, that was the second big lie that I came into contact with. Another big lie was their DSM, their directory of mental illnesses. I mean, in graduate school, that was their Bible. You had to memorize these friggin' classes of behavior. And, after working 7 years at that big state hospital, I saw for myself that those classes of behavior weren't cut and dried. I mean, they weren't like a cookie cutter where one starts and another one ends. They were bleeding into one another like colors on a watercolor.
Yeah.
So what I found later was 2/3 of the psychiatrists on the board that made up these mental illnesses were in league with Big Pharma. So
Yeah, makes sense.
every single one of those diagnoses in that DSM has been made up by psychiatrists, a board of psychiatrists, 2/3 of which are in league with Big Pharma, selling drugs. I would not be the least bit surprised if they already had a drug and they were looking for some mental illness for it to fix.
Yeah. Well, the same thing just happened with RFK Jr. firing that CDC panel. That there was conflicts of interest with all of them. Everyone on that panel, there was a conflict of interest with. So this happens all the time.
Yep, it's happening big time with psychiatry. That board meets once every 3 years, and they make up these illnesses. Every 3 years they get together and make up these illnesses.
So is that how often they update the DSM? Is it every 3 years?
About every 3 years they get together and they make these things up. There's not a single objective test for any one of them. And in the DSM-5, I believe there's 296 right now.
Wow.
They've all been completely made up by a group of psychiatrists. This list of fabricated disorders appears to be increasing astronomically every year with a new version of the DSM. So in 1952, there was 106 psychiatric diagnoses listed. In 1980, it had jumped to 256.
Wow.
Not a single objective test to ferret out any of these. No blood test, no EEG, no EKG, no kind of objective test. These are all made up. There's not a test for any of them. The DSM-5 now has 297, and they're fabricating more, every 3 years.
Yeah, and aren't there now some really ridiculous, not diseases, but these conditions that are now in the DSM? I think
Yeah.
I was listening to one of your interviews. You were listing just a few of the really ridiculous ones, and we just laughed. We just
what
couldn't
are some of
believe
the worst?
that.
Do you have any written down that are like just
Yeah,
absurd?
yeah. One that I suffer from badly, mathematics disorder.
Mathematics.
If you don't like math, you're disordered.
Yeah.
Something
Well,
wrong
that's
with you.
actually written in the DSM.
That's how. Yep. I wonder
Oh
what
my
they
goodness.
prescribed for it. You know.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Caffeine intoxication disorder. You're drinking too much coffee.
Oh,
You're
right.
disordered.
Oh my god.
I
Yeah.
have no idea what they prescribed for that either. Sibling
Yeah.
relational disorder. Kids fighting with each other.
Are you serious?
Oh my
If that goes on
goodness.
for any length of time, they're disordered.
I definitely had
Sexual
that when I was a
orientation
kid.
disturbance, homosexuality,
Yeah.
Florence syndrome, being overwhelmed by beauty, such as in Florence, Italy, fainting and dizziness.
Florence
That's the
syndrome.
symptoms. And they recommend antidepressant drugs for that one.
Oh my god.
Jeez.
Paris syndrome, suffered mostly by Japanese people visiting France. Symptoms include depression, anxiety, and feelings of persecution, which in my day would have been culture shock.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
So ridiculous.
So basically, what these suckers want to do is sell drugs.
Yeah.
None of those medications
Yeah.
that they're putting out cure anything. All they're doing
Zero.
is treating symptoms. They're
Yeah.
knocking down symptoms. So the antidepressant drug market in the U.S. is expected to hit 15.98 billion, not million, billion, by 2023. The global antipsychotic sales hit 14.54 billion in 2021, and it's expected to reach 15.5 billion by 2022.
So these antipsychotics, do they help reduce psychotic behavior?
What they are basically are major tranquilizers. They calm the people down, right?
Okay.
They do help reduce psychotic behavior because the voices stir these people up. They want them stirred up. They want them paranoid. They want them angry. They want them anxious, and they want them, jacked up.
Yeah.
So, what were these things? I had no idea what they were. But when they closed off the mental health centers, all these people hit the streets. And they didn't go to mental health centers. They did not want to take those drugs. They ended up on the streets. You look at San Francisco now, the streets are full of mentally ill people that are not taking those drugs. They don't want to go to a mental health center. They don't want to take those drugs. So the prisons are also full of them. So what are these guys going to do? They're psychotic. They can't work, sell drugs or steal, rob people. So the prisons are full of mentally ill people now, which is where I got my population, where I was working with them. So when I was working at the big state hospital, I started asking these guys, what are these voices telling you? What's the deal? And I watched how psychiatry. I would sit through these office visits with psychiatry, and the patients would complain of the voices, and the psychiatrist would go, "Oh, just ignore them. They're hallucinations. Just don't pay any attention to them." So I remember the first time I heard that, I called that patient back a week later, and I said, "Hey, how'd that work for you?" He said it didn't work at all. The voices got louder, they got worse. So I started calling back these other schizophrenic patients saying, psychiatrists are telling you to ignore the voices. How's that working for you? All of them said that the voices got worse. I'm like, okay, why are they getting worse? I didn't know, but all of them said that. So I had no lack of psychotic patients in the state hospital, and started asking them questions. And one thing that really surprised me when I got there, none of the staff except me were curious about what these voices were or what they were saying to these patients. As far as they were concerned, these were hallucinations because that's what they were taught in school. So they went, "Oh yeah, hallucinations caused by a chemical brain imbalance," even though they saw what I saw, that the psychiatrists weren't giving any baseline tests. There was no lab test. There was no any kind of objective test. There wasn't any blood test or any kind of test to determine, what was out of balance or by how much.
Yeah.
They saw that like I did, but they just completely glossed over it. So I
Mm.
started asking these guys questions about, hey, what's the deal? What are these things telling you? And I saw a pattern. The first pattern I saw, all of them were saying this, was that the voices were negative. They were consistently negative. They were insulting. They were derogatory. They were abusive. They were destructive. Um, they would say stuff like, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're crazy, nobody's going to believe you, your parents hate you, people are talking behind. Anything that you can imagine that would upset the patient is what these
Mm.
things were telling these people. And they didn't say anything positive at all. It was all negative crap. So I'm like,
Mm.
hallucinations, as far as I saw, on the front lines, were random. They were all over the place. This thing was running a pattern. What was
Yeah.
holding it negative? Why were the hallucinations negative? What was holding them on that negative pattern? How come they weren't random like all other hallucinations? That was the first thing I saw. And I talked to scores of schizophrenics. They all said the same thing. The second thing I saw was that they were anti-religious. So I had one patient come into my office one day and he says, hey, the voices came last night and I prayed the 23rd Psalm, and he said they went nuts. He said they acted like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. So I
Wow.
started asking him questions about that, and he said, yeah, that's what happens. That and the Lord's Prayer, they can't stand it. And I'm like,
Wow.
well, what kind of hallucination would be anti-religious? What kind of hallucination would hate the Lord's Prayer or Psalm 23? So I brought in all my other schizophrenics and I started passing out the 23rd Psalm and asking them a week later, how do your voices react to when you repeat this? All of them saying they went nuts. They didn't like it. They just
Wow.
got very
Wow.
agitated. They got very nasty. And, the more I tested it, the more that the evidence piled up.
Mm.
There was something there. Why would a hallucination be anti-religious? You know,
Yeah,
so
very curious.
So here they're starting to run patterns, and
Yeah.
hallucinations don't run patterns. Okay. The third one I spotted was that, and I saw this at the state hospital, but I couldn't explain it, was that every time the voices attacked them, their energy level was drained. It was totally
Yeah.
drained. They didn't have any energy. And I would ask them about that. And I'd ask them, how much energy did you have before the voices attacked? How much did you have afterward? And all of them were saying after the voices attacked, unless they were attacking them all the time, in which case they didn't have any energy anyway. But the ones that came
Mm.
periodically, it was almost like they attacked these people, they drained them, and then they'd let them build up their energy level again and come back and get them later. Almost like what we do to cows. You
Mm.
milk the cow, you put him out in the
Mm.
pasture, he eats grass, he makes more milk, and then you get him back later and you milk him again. You know,
Yeah.
that seemed to be what was happening with these patients. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Like
this
Monsters
this is
Inc. Yeah.
Oh
this
yeah.
is I'm going, this is really interesting. And I started asking them that, and they were all saying the same thing. So here was another pattern that appeared to be emerging. So what I came up with was a scale of 1 to 10, just kind of like a subjective measuring device. How much energy did you have before the voices came? 1 to 10. And how much did you have afterward? 1 to 10. And it was consistently less afterward. Right? So I
Mm.
did that with like 25 patients, got 25 sets, and we ran an analysis of variance on it, and it was statistically significant.
Hmm.
Right? So I'm
Wow.
like, what is going on here? You know, so here's another pattern. And then I'm asking these patients questions, and it took me like 2 years to figure out, because they didn't want to answer any questions.
Mm.
You look at that, doesn't benefit them at all. I mean, look what happens to them. They go into a psychiatrist's office. He asks them a few questions, and then he puts them on these powerful antipsychotic drugs that turn them into zombies. They hate it,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
Yeah.
know. Um, and they tell their parents, "Hey, I'm hearing voices," and their parents drag them into the psychiatrist. Um, there's no benefit to these guys telling anybody about the voices. They tell their friends, and their friends go, "Well, you're spooky, man. You're possessed. We're getting away from you. We're not going to hang out with you anymore. You're too weird." So there's no benefit to them talking to anybody about these things.
Hmm.
So one of them, and the voices themselves don't like it. I found that out later on. The voices do not want them telling anybody about them. Matter of fact, one of them came to me one day, and he said, "The voices don't want me coming here. They told me you already know too much, and don't tell me anything more.
Wow.
He already knows too much. Shut up." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"That's odd. What kind of hallucination would say something like that?" So one of the guys got irritated. I guess his voices got irritated because I was asking questions of the voices, and he went and told one of the psychiatrists. And the next morning, I ended up in the psychiatrist's office on the carpet, with being lectured by the psychiatrist, being ordered, "You will not ask these patients anything more about their voices, their hallucinations." This is what he's telling me. And that you are reinforcing those hallucinations by giving them credence, by asking questions about it. And I'm like, "Yeah, you're full of crap." I already knew enough
Yeah.
to know
Yeah.
he was just full of it.
Yeah.
And he was telling me an unsubstantiated lie. I knew that too. But you can't talk back to these guys. They're arrogant as the day is long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's threatening me. He goes, "You do this again, we're gonna you're gonna go under. You're gonna face some discipline."
So that a person, a psychiatrist over you, it's like a managerial role. Is he? Is this like would threaten a board certification at all? Would he like be able to report you up and like get your license revoked as a disciplinary thing?
At that case, licensing wasn't there.
Right.
It wasn't a big thing back then. This was in the 70s. That came later on.
Okay.
So later on, I did get licensed, but when I started talking about this stuff, I dropped it because I know they'd go after me. It would only be a
Yeah.
matter of time. But, so I just let it expire, and expired on good terms, so they can't touch me now.
Yeah. Awesome.
So-
So, out of curiosity, Jerry, like obviously these voices didn't like you asking questions. They knew that you knew too much. Was there ever an opportunity for you to directly communicate with these voices through? Oh, wow. What was that like?
Well, that happened in at the or at the prison. Okay, so when I got to the prison, I went from master's degree after 7 years at the state hospital into a PhD program. And I'm listening to what these people are saying in the PhD program, and there wasn't anything clinically useful. I mean, what they were teaching, I already saw wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd already been there. And what was weird is that most of those professors, the most clinical experience they had was working with college students, or maybe in a mental health center. I mean, they weren't on the front lines like I was. They weren't there. They didn't have that kind of experience. And I'm going, this is just piled higher and deeper. This is just, it's just more, it's just more of the, just more bullcrap piled up.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
I just couldn't deal with it.
Yeah.
So I went, okay, I got to get out of here. I'm getting depressed and feeling crazy. I mean, this is just, I'm not going to subject myself to this stuff anymore. And I
It's like
started talking
gaslighting
back
at
to
that
him.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, I started talking back to them, and they didn't like that. So,
Oh, no.
I was in trouble.
Yeah.
You don't talk back to professors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No matter how much experience you got, you don't. It's like a psychiatrist. You don't talk back to them either if you're under them.
Yeah.
So, after that, I went, okay, where I want to go. And I was looking at Arizona Highway magazines, and it looked like a wonderful place. They didn't talk about how hot it got here. They didn't talk about the average pay was well behind most of the nation. So I got a job at one of the biggest mental health clinics here, and thank God I was away from schizophrenics. I was so fed up with schizophrenics. I was so frustrated because I didn't have a good idea of what was going on with them, and I really couldn't investigate the voices at the state hospital, because if one of these other guys squealed on me again, I'd be in trouble with psychiatry again.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to really, fly under the radar. I had to be very careful with the questions I asked. I had to make sure I didn't push them too far. And it was very slow going. It was like first gear, getting bit by bit by bit, just little pieces of information here and there. And the more pieces I had, the better it was, because I could then go up with a new guy come on the office. I'd go, hey, listen, I'm interested in these voices. This is what I know about them so far, which was far more than anybody else knew about them. And they realized I was serious about it. I wanted to know what these things were. And a lot of them did too. They weren't sure what they were, So the more I could tell them, the more they went, well, this guy's legit. Now, when I got into the state prison, I found that it was full of schizophrenics also. And I'm like, oh no, not schizophrenics again. I'm no. It was like I crawled away from them, and went to the mental health center, and I was working with alcoholics and drug addicts at that point, but they weren't schizophrenics, So it was like, okay, you could talk to these people. Not that it made a great deal of difference, but you could talk to them. Schizophrenics, trying to counsel a schizophrenic was like trying to shoot a rhino in the butt with a BB rifle and getting it to move. It's just like there was rationality didn't matter. I mean, it just didn't matter. I mean, they were in a world of their own, and I've only got glimpses of what that world was like. So when I got to the prison, what I did was put together groups of schizophrenics, and this was a very select group, because most schizophrenics didn't want to talk about the voices or what they were saying. So I made an agreement with I always had like 12 or 15 schizophrenics I was working intensely with, who we had agreement. I'll do everything I can to help you, but what I want in return is, when we're working together, I want you to tell me in real time what the voices are telling you.
Yeah.
And we had an agreement. And that's where I would start talking to the schizophrenic voices through these prisoners. They would tell me what the voices were telling them, and I would ask, questions to the patient via the voices. So there was like the patient always served as the interpreter.
Yeah.
And then what I saw was more patterns kept coming up. The further I went, the more patterns started coming up, until I had a set of like 23 of them.
If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you have a curious mind, an open heart, and are a seeker of freedom and truth. And there is nothing more freeing than seeking and finding the truth of who you are. And this is where I'd love to support you. I'm a self-alignment coach that helps you to align with who you were divinely born to be, not who you were conditioned to be. The aim of my work is to guide you to live a more purposeful and fulfilling life that is totally authentic to you. One of the modalities I work with is PSYCH-K, where I facilitate you in transforming your limiting beliefs and perceptions into empowering beliefs that align with your goals and where you want to be in life, not where you've already been, which is often lost, stuck, or unfulfilled. I also work with human design, which offers an energetic blueprint of who you are and how you were designed to operate in the world. I offer readings for both individuals and couples, as it is not only an amazing tool for self-discovery and alignment, but also for understanding different relationship dynamics. So if you're ready to overcome blocks and programming that doesn't serve you anymore, unlock your potential, and harness your innate gifts, then I'd love to work with you. Get started today and book in an obligation-free 30-minute discovery call with me via the link in the show notes, and I'd love to connect and see how I can support you. Do something today that your future self will thank you for.
Okay, so
wow.
They were, they fostered and created negative emotion. They energetically drained their victims. They got louder after sunset. They got louder when ignored. They fostered destructive behavior on the part of the patient. They fostered isolation. They didn't want the schizophrenic being around anybody. They wanted them sealed up in a room by themselves, just listening to the voices. They demanded the attention of the victim. They wouldn't allow the victim to ignore them. They maneuvered for increased control over the victim. They gaslighted. They manipulated perception. It goes on and on. There were like 23 of these things. So any of you guys out there working with schizophrenics, and especially you freaking psychiatrists who think you know it all, This list of patterns is on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com under articles. Go there, pull it up, and you will see them for yourselves.
Yeah.
That these voices are running patterns. They're not hallucinations. Hallucinations don't run patterns. This is, what do you call it? An operational definition of what these things are. Go look at it. Friggin' bunch of bozos.
Bunch of clowns. Well, I had a personal experience like this, and everything you described, like it totally fits that. I had an ex-wife. I was married for a couple of years when I was in the Army that found out had schizophrenia after we got married, and everything was there. She had auditory and visual hallucinations, and ran the same kind of patterns. I never got any insights into what was being said because I really didn't have any awareness about that. Like that, it was a thing. I thought it was just like what people see. It's like, oh, just crazy hallucinations. You just think it's random. But jump to the end of the story years later because my daughter was with me, and it's like her stepmom at that time. So my daughter told me years later, when she was little, like 6 or 7 years old, she actually saw an entity in the room with us when we were arguing. And it's like she would
shadow person.
It was like a female. It was dark, red eyes.
Oh.
But it was about the same height as us.
Shadow person.
Okay.
Wow.
And red or lime green eyes.
Yeah, it was like red eyes, and it was like grinning. It was like enjoying the energy of us arguing and fighting.
Oh yeah, they love it. They feed off of it. That's their food source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as these patterns kept increasing, I got to wondering, okay, what would happen if I interfered with those patterns? Because they were repeatable. I mean, they were predictable. They were repeatable. They happened with virtually all of them. They all admitted to these things. So with these groups of prisoners I was working with, I would give them homework to disrupt these patterns. And then I'd bring them back and I'd say, well, okay, do you do your homework this weekend? I'd bring them back once a week. What happened when you did your homework? And they all started reporting the voices didn't like it. They don't want us coming here. They think you're a bozo. They think you're stupid. You're crazy. Don't go there. None of them backed out because of that. Some of them said their voices were just scream bloody murder when they were coming over to my office. They did not want them to come there. So it was like, okay, here's all these complaints. And it was not just one of them. It was virtually all of them. So then I'd come up with, and I was always asking these guys questions. I would hit them with hundreds and hundreds of questions. What'd they do here? How'd they react to this? What'd they do when you did this? And I'd keep coming up with these different ways to disturb these patterns. A lot of times just do the opposite of what they're telling you to do. And so that was the first thing that came up. They didn't want them coming there. The second thing that came up was one guy, as he was leaving, he turned around my doorway and he looks at me and he goes, "You know what you're doing is dangerous, don't you?" And I just looked at him. I'd never thought of it. I'm going, well, I'm thinking, they're in your head. They're not in mine. They can't come out of there. I mean, why should I be afraid? But it was like he was serious. I mean, he had a serious look on his face. He looked at me, he warned me, and then he turned around and he walked out. And I'm like, that was almost like the paper with they said, in undergraduate school with the two crazy guys having to change. I tucked it back there. I didn't forget about it, but I just kept it back for further reference. And it was like a warning, but I didn't see any sense of it because I didn't think these things could come out and hurt anybody else. I thought they were stuck in with these guys, whatever they were, if they were anything. And I didn't want to believe they were demons. I didn't believe in demons. I wasn't like a Bible thumper or anything like that. I mean, I believed in God, but I was like a C-level Christian. I wasn't a good one. So
yeah,
it was like I got set back. This was part of my distrust of authority. Was when I was in the Boy Scouts. I was going for star rank, and back then we had to memorize the whole friggin' Morse code to get that rank in the Boy Scouts. The whole Morse code, that was murder. And I finished all my requirements, And then I handed it into the scoutmaster. And what I didn't know was my dad went behind my back and went to the scoutmaster and said he doesn't go to church. Well, neither did my father, who was a hypocrite, you
Yeah.
know. But here he is telling my scoutmaster. So I turned in all the requirements, and they were all solid. And he goes, well, I'm not going to give you the rank because you're not reverent. You're not going to church. And I went, okay, how long do I have to go to church for? And he goes, 6 months. And I went, okay, I'll go for 6 months. So I went to the nearest church that I could walk to. And while we were there, I remember we put together a little puzzle of some religious ancient in the Old Testament, one of the temples or something like that. And then I heard about the preacher who was running around with one of his married parishioners, you know.
Oh my
And
God.
even
Yeah.
though I was a young teenager, I'm like, oh, this is what church is about. Oh, okay, you know. I finished my 6 months, and I turned in the paper saying, okay, I'd gone for 6 months. I said, okay, now give me my rank. And he looks at he calls up the preacher, and the preacher says, well, yeah, he came for 6 months, but he certainly didn't set the world on fire. He showed up, which is what I agreed to do.
Yeah.
And then he says, well, I'm not going to give it to you, you know, because you're still not reverent enough. And I said, screw you. Then take your Boy
Yeah.
Scouts and stick it. And I quit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just like moving the goalpost. That's that's such a
Like
dumb move.
20 years later, he gave me that thing. Well, after I was out of the Scouts, after I was out of graduate school, he finally gave me that rank. But so
Really?
that set me back 10 or 15 years. You know, so I was like, yeah, this is what Christians do. You know, so
Yeah.
it really set me back. You know, I was always reading spiritual stuff, especially in graduate school, because it was so spiritually dry. It was like the Mojave Desert. I mean, it was just so, there was no spirit to it at all. And what comes to mind was, okay, I just finished my master's degree, and I rode out to the coast of Georgia with a friend of mine on motorcycles. And I was thinking, I went, okay, I got the master's degree. It's spiritually dry. There wasn't anything about spirit. We're spiritual beings. I knew that, you know, and there wasn't any mention of spirit at all. You know, there wasn't any mention of mind. There wasn't anything esoteric at all. And they frowned on me reading these other books when I asked questions about these other kind of forms of knowledge. Carlos Castaneda and some of these others. I mean, they just kind of brushed it off. So I remember I'm sitting on the coast, and Rick wanted to go to a sporting store, and I was thinking, I wonder what would happen if I just let my spirit lead me for one day, and I went wherever I felt like going. And he was taking off that day. I was by myself, so I went. I swore to myself. I said, okay, I'm just going to follow my feelings. Wherever they lead me, I'm going to go. And inside of about 10 minutes, I was on private property. You know, I went over a barbed wire fence, no trespassing signs all over the place. And here's this feeling like, yeah, go this way. You know, so, well, okay. And then here comes these guys on quads. And here's this voice in my head going, hey, there's moonshiners here. They don't like people going around their stills. And this is a perfect place for those things. And these might be the moonshiner guys on those quads. Get out of here. Go back to the campground. And I'm like, get out of here. You got no place here. So this argument between these voices in my head telling me to get out of there, and me saying, I'm not listening to you today. I've listened to you for 6 years now. I went through all this crap in college, and I still don't know myself. I still don't know what's going on with the mind. I still know nothing about the spirit. I know nothing that works with, as far as I could tell, with psychotherapy. You know, shut up. I'm going to test this out. So I kept going deeper and deeper into the swamp. And then this big black snake just runs out right from under my feet almost. This big, like 4 foot big black snake. And here's this voice in my head going, go back, go back. You're going to get bit by a water moccasin. Nobody knows where you are. They're going to find you dead out here, a skeleton in 10 years. You're in the middle of nowhere. Nobody comes out here. There's no paths here. You don't even know where you are. You're not even sure how you're going to get back. What you're doing is crazy. Turn around and go back. And I'm going, shut up, get out of here. So I kept walking deeper and deeper into the swamp because this feeling was leading me into the swamp. And I'm like, this is getting a little crazy. And, it was late in the afternoon, and I was still walking further and further along the edge of this swamp. And there wasn't any roads, there wasn't anything out there. I mean, I'm in the middle of absolutely nowhere, deep in this swamp. And I'm starting to wonder because it's starting to get late in the afternoon. And I'm going, am I just acting crazy or what? This doesn't make any sense. And I just kept going a while longer, and I saw off to my left, out in the swamp, is this bright white sand island, about 10 feet out into the swamp. Bright white. There was no other white sand anywhere. It was all black muck. And here's this white sand island in the middle of the swamp where there's no white sand anywhere else. And that got my attention. I'm standing there looking at that, and I'm going, well, how bizarre is that? And then here's this tug again saying, go out there. It didn't say it in words. It was just a feeling. Go out there. And I'm kind of going, you're crazy. How am I going to get out there? Like 10 feet out in this, here's this water and muck, 10 feet. I didn't know how deep it was. I didn't know if it was quicksand. There was no way to get out there. There's no rocks anywhere. And so I went, no, this is getting nuts. This is getting nuts. And I look and I said, why do I need to go out there? I can see the whole thing from here. I mean, there's nothing there. 10 feet away. I mean, you can see what's on there 10 feet away. The thing was only like maybe 10, 12 feet, a little bit oblong. And I'm like, why should I go out there? This is not making any sense. And I decided, okay, this is crazy. I'm not doing this. This is getting really bizarre. And I turned around, and I started walking back. And then there was this feeling like, you do that, you'll never know. It wasn't in words. It was just this kind of disappointed feeling. So I turned around, I went back, and I'm standing there looking at this thing. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to get out there? So I started looking around the swamp, and I found these broken branches and pieces of tree limbs and built this rickety bridge over that 10 feet of swamp. And then, finally jumped out onto the island. I'm standing there, and I look around, and I don't see anything. And then I look down at my feet, and here's these little black sand crabs. Now, I've seen them before. When you get up on them, they scatter in all directions. They just run all over the place. They didn't do that. They were all moving from right to left, not in a straight line, but they were all over the place, and they're all moving from right to left in a straight line in a group.
Wow.
And I'm going, that's odd. I've never seen that before, And I'm watching them going, that's really weird. And my attention is grabbed by one of them, and he runs over this pebble. And I stand there, and I see the pebble, and I look around the beach, and there's no other pebbles on that whole island. It's the only pebble on the whole island. So I go to pick it up, and it doesn't come out of the ground. And I'm going, well, what's with this pebble? It's not coming out of the ground. So I stick my finger under it, okay, and I grab it, and I pull it up. And out of the ground, almost like it was materializing out of nowhere, came this 6-inch beautiful Indian spear point, like it was made yesterday.
Oh, wow.
It was sharp as a razor. I mean, it could have cut you. Just rub it across your skin, it would have cut you open. Beautiful. And I'm like, that was like the affirmation. I knew that was special. I knew that was a gift. So it was like, okay, you're on the right track. So that really struck me. And, I drug back into camp, and it was starting to get dark. And I made it back to camp after dark with this beautiful spear point. It's sitting above my head now on a board. I still have it.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's incredible.
It didn't end there. So it was like something was telling me there's more to this than your 6 years in psychology and counseling. It was like this was the affirmation. And for me, I knew that was the affirmation. I mean, okay, there's more to this. So that spear point felt so good. It felt so special that I started wearing it around my neck and when I went to work. And it would have been considered a weapon. If they would have seen it, I would have been in trouble. But I kept it under my shirt. But the tip was just very pointy and very sharp. So when I wore it around my neck, every time I bent over, it stabbed me in the gut. So, I'm like, okay, this isn't working out real well. So it was December 23rd. I had a dream that spear point had fallen off my neck onto a tile floor that looked very much like the tile floor in the psychiatric unit I was working, and that it had broken in half. And I went, well, considering the circumstances under which I found this thing, maybe I better do something about it. So I went and got the strongest string I could find, which was a nylon guitar string, and I wrapped it around the head of that spear point like 5 or 6 times and tied it off real tight, and then put a whole tube of super glue on top of it so it wouldn't break. And then I welded the string together. I melted it together so it was all one string, and then tested it out. It held, and I wore it around my neck that way. It's going, okay, this isn't going to break. So on December 23rd, I had that dream that it fell off my neck and broke. And then so one morning I put it on, and this time it was cold out, and I put on a tight sweater, and I had it on top of my shirt so it couldn't stab me. But I'm thinking, okay, if it does break, it's going to get caught on the sweater because the sweater is real tight, and the spear point will get caught in it, and it might fall, but it's not going to break. So I'm walking down the aisle of the Psychiatric Rehabilitation Center, just strolling along, and all of a sudden, it snaps, it breaks, it falls right past the sweater, falls onto the same tile floor as in the dream, and the tip shatters into a million pieces.
Oh, no way.
And I'm in absolute shock. It was like Twilight Zone. It's like do 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 do. I did everything I can to prevent that, and here it is laying at my feet with the tip shattered, and I'm stooped down in a shock, just staring at it in the middle of this hallway in the psychiatric unit, and the thing would have been looked at as a weapon. So here comes a nurse, and she says, "Are you okay?" And I grab the thing and I stick it in my pocket. Thank God she didn't see it. And I'm in shock, and I'm going, yeah, I'm fine. And it was like, boom, my head just exploded. It was like something was talking to me. It was like, so that was like the affirmation that there's more to what's going on than just studying stuff. Okay? So here I am at the psychiatric hospital, and weird stuff was happening, and I found that if I didn't write it down, that I would forget it, and I'm like, because it didn't fit in, it didn't fit in with normal reality. Yeah. And I was reading Carlos Castaneda, and he came up with that same exact thing, saying what happens with the human mind is when you run into something that doesn't fit your concept of reality, like these voices and the weird stuff that was happening with schizophrenics, and he's saying your ego will just blot it out because it doesn't fit. It's like putting a round piece in a square hole. It doesn't fit. So that struck me. It was like, how do I test this? Because a lot of tests, not of stuff you couldn't test, but that was critical. I had to know the answer to that. I mean, I had to know, because if I'm looking at stuff that's making no sense and I'm blotting it out, I'm never going to get anywhere. And how do I test it? So here I am thinking, like, for like 2 or 3 weeks, I'm thinking, how can I test that out? How can I see? And everything I came up with would have got me locked up or fired. Like, if you're going to disrupt normal reality to that extent, you're going to be in trouble. You don't create an upset to that extent and not end up in trouble if they catch you. So how do I do this without getting caught? And
that's the right question.
Thank you. So what I had was, I had a friend that I grew up with. He was a World War II enthusiast, and he had all this German stuff. It wasn't real German stuff, but he fabricated an SS tunic, a German SS tunic. He made it himself, and it looked pretty real. Wow. He had a pair of riding boots that looked like German jack boots, and I had a pair of green army pants that kind of looked like military stuff, and he had a red swastika. I had a German helmet, a World War I German helmet, and I had bought a replica MP40 Schmeitzer machine gun, a German machine gun,
Mm.
and I used to wear those to Halloween parties. It was always a big hit, because it looked like a German stormtrooper. So, I'm thinking, and I thought of that outfit, and I still had it, and it was in storage in the. I was living in the staff dorms of the hospital at that time, and one of the patients that I had graduated from the beautician's class at the state hospital, he was an ex-convict. Okay, and he wasn't crazy, but he fooled the judge into thinking he was crazy, and he got sent to the mental hospital instead of being sent to the prison. And I was intrigued by him, and I put him through cosmetology class, and he did well, and he started his own barber shop in Milledgeville, and he gave me
cool.
free haircuts, and I'd hang around with him because he was a character.
Worth it. Yeah.
And he was he wasn't clinically crazy, but he was crazy. He was stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that weekend, Rick was a nursing student, and I was working, in counseling, and we had dates with these two social work interns, and I'm thinking, and finally, boom, goes. So I go to James, and I said, James, I got an idea. I got something I need to test out. I need your help because you're the only one crazy enough I know to do this. So I said, we got a date with two social work interns this weekend, at sunset. It'll be, shortly after dark out at the lake. And there was a long dirt road that went out to Rick's property on the lake, and it was isolated. So I said, James, this is what I want. I want to dress you up in this Nazi uniform, and I want to put you in the bushes by the road, okay? And then we're going to have these two girls in the car, okay? And I want to stop right in front of where you are, okay? I'm going to get out of the car and walk around out of sight, and I want you to slowly get up after I get out of the car and disappear out to the side. I want you to slowly get up and walk like 10 feet in front of the bright headlights, very slowly in front of the car. Don't look at the girls. Don't look at the car. Just act like it's not there. My purpose is not to scare them. I want to see what they do with this. So what I plan to do is soon as I disappeared off to the left where the car was stopped, as soon as I disappeared, James walked out in the Nazi uniform with the machine gun, the Nazi swastika, the German helmet, the jack boots, the SS tunic. No doubt that he was a Nazi soldier in the middle of nowhere. There's no army base anywhere around there. And I ran back to the car because I didn't want to leave them any time to get scared. Okay? I wanted to be back there by the time he walked into the brush. And it went off like clockwork. He's walking very slowly. I could see him there. I'm running back to the car. I'm behind the car as he disappears off into the darkness off to the left. And I'm opening the car door as soon as he disappeared. And I told the girls I thought I saw something out there. I just wanted to go check it out. And I got back in. I didn't say anything. I said, I didn't see anything. I don't know what that was. And I just kept driving. I didn't say a word. They didn't say anything.
Oh,
wow. We're driving along for about 5 minutes, and finally one of them says, "We saw a soldier. Look at the first degradation. It went from a Nazi stormtrooper with the German helmet, the swastika, the jack boots, very clear it was a Nazi soldier, to a soldier. Because a Nazi soldier in the middle of nowhere and at night didn't make any sense.
No,
Yeah.
So
none.
it made more sense to see a soldier, right? And I went, oh, you guys are pulling my leg. I mean, just because I thought I saw something, you guys are making this up. And they just went silent again. They didn't say anything.
Wow.
We got to Rick's place, and then after we ate and we were sitting around flapping our mouths, I tell Rick, I said, Rick, it's been a strange night. I mean, I thought I saw something weird out on the way here. I got out and looked, and there wasn't nothing there. And I got back in the car, and these guys said they saw a soldier. And I said, there's no Army base around here. And he goes, no, there's nothing around here. Fort Gordon's 75 miles away. There's no soldiers around here. And then I told the girls, I said, tell Rick what you saw. And they said, well, we saw a hunter. So it went from Nazi soldier to hunter, and then still it didn't make any sense. And I said, Rick, what would a hunter be hunting out in the darkness without a flashlight at night, walking around in the middle of the brush? What, with no light? What would they be hunting? Nothing. It's not hunting season. They just shut up. They didn't say anything. Okay. So I'm watching this degradation, of something that didn't make any sense, to forcing it to make sense. And then maybe a couple of months later, one of them was finished their internship, and I was driving both of them to the airport so the one could catch a plane. And I said, you remember that night at Rick's? That was a weird night. What happened that night? They didn't remember anything. They had blotted it out.
No way.
Wow.
So interesting.
That was my like, okay, when you see something weird happen, write it down so you don't forget it or distort it.
Yeah.
Very good.
And that's what I did from then on. Every time I saw something weird, I put it in a notebook so I didn't forget it. Here's all these weird things working with schizophrenics building up.
Such an interesting experiment to run on, because stuff like that fascinates me, like human psychology and behavior and the things that we do. And it make so much sense because, I mean, look at what's happened in the last 5 years. I think people will go to any lengths to make things that don't make sense so that it fits their reality and their belief system. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And this opened up the door to another reality. So here I am with all these patterns, and I'm giving these guys exercises to do to break up those patterns. Okay, and they're all coming back. The voices don't like it. They don't like it. They don't want us to come here. They're all saying this. All 15 or 17 of them. They're all saying the same thing. And then the guy comes up, and at the end he goes, what you're doing is dangerous. And I'm like, okay, here it comes. More weirdness. And then one of them comes in. He got in without a pass. I don't know how he got into the medical unit without a pass. And he knocks at my door, and I'm like, how'd you get in here? And he goes, the voices want to talk to you. And I'm like, they want to talk to me personally? He goes, yeah, they want to talk to you personally. And I'm like, okay. That had never happened before. It was always the interaction went through the client or the patient. The patient would tell me what the voices were saying, and I'd tell them, go tell the voices to go stick their head in the toilet, or what. I mean, it would be like that.
Yeah.
But they're saying they want to talk to you personally. So I said, okay, sit down. I closed the door, and I'm like, what's all this about? They'd never talked to me, and that's like probably more than 20 years that I've been investigating these things. They never talked to me personally.
Wow.
Matter of fact, they told the patients not to even tell them anything they were saying, let alone talk to me personally. So this was in violation of everything they had ever told the patients. So this was like high weirdness as far as I was concerned. It's like, okay, what's happening here? And I sit down and I go, okay, what do they have to say? And these words came out of his mouth. You have no right to interfere with our way of life. And I'm like, boom, It was at that point that I realized that these things were entities. This wasn't any hallucination. This wasn't any subconscious something or other. These things were entities. I just felt it. It was like just an implosion. It was my denial system just completely caved in. It just completely fell apart. I was in shock. And I said something to the patient. Well, tell them something. And he said, I don't have to tell them. They can hear everything you say. He said, they can see everything that you see. And I'm like, I never realized that before either. I thought maybe they were stuck in their heads and they were blind and they couldn't see anything. So here was like a 1-2 punch, boom, boom. And I'm like, and I'm looking at this guy, I'm like, are you messing with me? And he goes, no, I'm telling you the truth, honest to God. They said this. Those weren't my words. And I could tell when they're lying. I mean, I've been working around prisoners for, you know, mental people. I can tell when they're lying. He wasn't
Yeah.
lying, you know. And he walked out of there, and I was in shock. My denial system, which was already in tatters. I mean, anybody who'd already known as much as I knew would have figured these things out long ago. But I didn't want to believe in demons and weirdness and that kind of stuff. But it just collapsed. It was like, these are entities. Now, what
Yeah.
am I getting into? What are they? How they work? What are they? What are they? I had all these questions that had no answers. And
Mm.
I'm like, well, where is this all going? That was another warning sign. I mean, it was like that was a shot across the bow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're out of your league. Don't be messing around here. It was like
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's like a ship firing a shot across your bow. But you know, adrenaline junkie me, it didn't stop. So I just kept working with these guys, and then I was reading a book by Miguel Ruiz called The Voice of Knowledge, where he also discovered that these things were parasitic entities, that they were feeding off of the negative emotions that they would create in these people. And I
Mm.
had seen that too. I'd seen that all the way back as far as the state hospital, but it became crystal clear when I was working with the prisoners. They would all tell me the voices would do anything they could to generate negative emotional energy. They would say anything, any lie, whatever they could do to get these people upset. And I didn't have to worry about setting them off like I did at the state hospital. I think the psychiatrists were afraid of these guys because they were getting beat up by schizophrenics at a rate higher than any of the other staff at the state hospital, other than the attendants that were spending 24 hours a day with these people.
Wow.
Their assault rate was equal with the attendants. And I'm going, what are they saying to these guys that are getting them beat up?
Mm.
So I'm like, what are they saying in 15 or 20 minutes a month where these guys are beating them up? So what happened was one of the gals who was about ready to graduate from the beautician's class, um, she stopped their meds for the third time. And if they stopped their meds 3 times, we would discharge them, because if they couldn't stay on their meds when they were being handed them, they're not going to stay on them when they're out and they have to go to a mental health center and get them. And there's nobody
Mm.
watching over them, making them take them. They're just not going to
Right.
do it. So we would discharge them. So I called this woman's, this gal's mother and said, we're going to have to discharge her. She's not staying on her meds. She went off 3 times. We warned her. We told her we were going to discharge her if she went off her meds again. And she went off her meds again. She went nuts in the beautician class. She upset the class. She upset the instructor. Um, she's not going to stay on her meds. We're wasting our time. We put somebody in there will stay on their meds. And the mother just begged me. She said, please don't do that. I can't deal with her. I'll come up there and we'll find out why she went off her meds. And I went, well, that's good. Somebody else going to help me try to find out when they went off their meds. I can't
Mm.
do it alone. It hadn't worked for me.
Yeah.
So she came up one Friday afternoon, and we brought the girl in. And both of us are on her. We're saying, why did you go off your meds? You knew what was going to happen. You knew you would be discharged if you did that. Tell us. And the girl said, you won't believe me. And I said, well, try me. I've heard nothing you can tell me after 7 years here is going to throw me out of kilter. So just tell us, why did you go off your meds? And she said, because the voices told me that the psychiatrist was poisoning me, and they pointed to the side effects of the medications as proof that I was being poisoned, which was true.
Mm.
Those
Yeah.
meds were toxic.
Yeah.
They're very toxic. They have horrible side effects. Here's some of the side effects of Thorazine, which they were using at the time: dizziness, drowsiness, anxiety, sleep problems, insomnia, breast swelling and discharge, changes to menstrual period, weight gain, swelling of the hands and feet, dry
Mm.
mouth, stuffy nose, blurred vision, constipation, and it just goes on and on and on and on.
Wow.
These drugs are horrible drugs. Those
Mm.
are toxic effects. They're poisonous effects of those drugs.
Yeah.
So the voices weren't telling her a lie. She was being poisoned. And I found out later that those drugs actually shrink the brain of these people.
Wow.
Wow.
That what they found when they started doing autopsies on state hospital patients that were on antipsychotic drugs, these phenothiazines, for long periods of time, their brains were shrunk like walnuts. You know,
Far
they
out.
Jeez.
and you know, they published that. You know, that I don't know how they got it out past the drug companies, because the drug companies pretty much control everything these universities put into print. If they don't
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what they're saying, they'll kill it. They won't fund it, or they'll stop it. But
Hmm.
these guys got this published, and then when the big psychiatric mafia and Big Pharma found out about it, they went, "Oh no, it's not our drugs, it's the schizophrenia that's shrinking their brains." And
Mm.
the researchers went, no, we don't think so. So they started feeding these antipsychotic drugs to rats, mice, and monkeys, and found out that with long-term use, their brains were shrunk too. So not
Wow.
only were these drugs not curing anything, they weren't curing schizophrenia, they were only tamping down the symptoms. They were just treating the symptoms. They weren't
Yeah.
curing anything, and they were doing permanent neurological damage in the meantime, and these psychiatrists weren't telling these patients anything about it.
Well, what
I
gets
sat
me is
through,
they've put them out to the public without apparently doing these tests first
Yeah.
to make sure that it doesn't have any kind of crazy effects, or maybe they did and they just didn't tell anybody.
no, this was discovered after they had been using them for decades,
Yeah.
Wow.
you know. So it's like the FDA is paid off by Big Pharma also. You know,
Yeah.
you can't
Totally.
trust the FDA. You can't, what they were doing with, this pandemic stuff,
Yeah.
it's all covered by the FDA. I mean, they covered the whole thing. They
Yeah.
lied,
Yeah.
they cheated, they stole.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It goes deep.
Yeah, it goes deep. It's going on with Big Pharma. So here
Mm.
I was asking this guy in my office, uh, I said, tell me what you think about this paragraph. And I got to the part where it was talking about these entities being parasitic entities,
Hmm.
sucking the energy out of these people. Now, I'd already clearly seen this. I saw it as far
Mm.
back as the state hospital, but it was very clear in the prison. And I would ask these guys, I'd bring it up to them. I'd say, did you notice that after the voices leave, that your energy level went down to nothing? And a lot of them didn't even notice that because they were feeling so bad anyway. They were feeling
Mm.
paranoid. They were feeling
Yeah.
depressed. It was just one more thing that they didn't notice. When I
Yeah.
brought it up to them, a lot of them noticed. And one of them said, I felt like I was tossing and turning in bed all night. The voices were attacking me, and I felt like I was uh, working out in the hot sun with a pickaxe, digging holes all day in the hot sun. He said, that's how exhausted I was in the morning. And I
Wow.
said, well, you didn't, where did your energy go? You didn't use it, you know. You were tossing and turning in bed. I mean, where did it go? And they go, I don't know. So I started asking these guys, do you notice that your energy levels drained after these things leave? A lot of them didn't even notice until I mentioned it. Okay.
Mm.
Um, but they had no idea what happened or what was causing it. So, I'd say, well, if you've heard the voices 10,000 times, and every time you heard the voices, your energy disappeared, where do you think your energy went? And they would go, I don't know. And then I'd ask them, well, if you were sitting near a fire and you stuck your hand in a fire 5,000 times, and each time you got burnt, what's burning you? They go, oh, the fire. And I said,
Mm.
well, if the voices come 10,000 times and every time they came, your energy levels drops to nothing, where'd your energy go? Well, I don't know. They were
Yeah.
being
Mm.
Didn't make the
Yeah.
connection.
They
Yeah.
couldn't make the connection. Some of them did. Some went, the voices took it. It was like a surprise to them.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The voices didn't want them to know that. So
Mm.
it's like, if you had a big leech stuck to you and you were aware of that leech, you wouldn't just sit there and look at it. You'd do something about it. It's the same thing. The voices seem to know that if the patients realized that they were being fed off of, they would do something about the voices. They would
Yeah.
realize that these things were dangerous, beyond Trump telling them to try to kill themselves and stuff like that. As I got to that point where I read that point where, okay, the voices are parasites. This guy I'm reading to, I turned around and I said, what do you think of that? And he's looking at me like a zombie. I mean, he's just frozen, looking at me like a zombie. And I'm like, what is going on with him? And I'm going, he's going to attack. So I push my chair against the back wall, and I'm watching him. And all of a sudden, behind my head erupts this loud crackling. It sounded just like an arc welder. You know, it's like crack, 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 crack. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? I look, I don't see anything. And then it moves to the right-hand wall, and it starts moving up at a 45-degree angle up the right-hand wall of my office. Crack, 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 just like an arc welder. You know? And I look at
Wow.
him, and I go, do you hear that? And he's just staring at me like, you know, just like a zombie, just, you know, not saying anything. So I'm trying to split my attention between him and this crackling, you know, the crack, 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 because I didn't know what he was going to do. And this thing just goes all the way up the right-hand wall to the ceiling, and then it cuts across the ceiling, and it starts crackling across the ceiling. So I'm able to keep him in view, and this crackling noise, I couldn't see anything. It was there. It didn't smell. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't feel anything. It was just a loud noise. And it went
Yeah.
on for like 3 or 4 minutes. I mean, it wasn't just a
Jeez.
short crackle. And then it starts coming down the left-hand wall where I'm sitting, and it jumps into this Rubbermaid trash can right next to my leg. And I bend over and I look in there, and there's nothing in there. The inmate porter had cleaned it last night. It's got a lining of a clear plastic bag in there. That's it. And then boom, just like that, that sound stops. And I'm like stunned. I'm like, here's a do 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 do. It's like Twilight Zone again. Here
Jeez.
it comes again. You know, another psychological blow. It's like, bam. You know, and I'm looking at this guy, and he slowly gets up, very slowly, and he goes, I gotta leave. And I'm going, yeah, go,
Jeez.
get out of here, go.
Oh,
And
that's bizarre.
I'm stunned, and he shuffles. He doesn't walk out. He shuffles out, and he shuffles down the hallway, and he leaves. And I get up and I examine the walls, and there's no burn marks. There's no evidence that anything had ever happened. So I walk out into the hallway, and I go over to the doctor's office. It's locked. Nobody's there. I go to the nurse's office. It's locked. Nobody's there. Nobody's in the hallway. There's nothing that would account for this. And I clearly heard it. And I'm like, am I losing my mind? Am I going crazy? You know, it actually crossed my mind. Hey, whatever this is, it's getting me. And I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. I closed my office. I canceled all my meetings for that day. And I just stared out the window like, what is going on? What is happening? Where is this going? You know, and it shocked me because I didn't think these things could affect physical reality. You know, I thought they were stuck in their head. This was very clear that they could affect physical reality because they were creating the sound waves that was hitting my ears. And then the question became from there, if they can do that, what else can they do?
Mm.
You know, and it's like I'm in this quandary, like what is going on? Where is all this going? There was nothing I'd ever read about this. It certainly wasn't in any psychology books. You know,
Yeah.
so it was like 3 months later, I finally got the courage to call this guy back. They put out a pass for him to come to the psychology department, and he shows up in the office, and he looks good. I thought he'd be a wreck. I'm thinking, like, if whatever this thing is that was possessing him could do that, and I suspected it was that, he should be a wreck, but he wasn't. You know, he had good energy. He looked good. He was coherent. He didn't look paranoid. And I said, come on in. And I said, sit down. And we did a little bit of small talk. And I said, do you remember the last time you were in here? I said, did you hear that crackling noise that was in the office before you left? And he said, yeah, I heard it. He said, but I was surprised you did. So apparently that happened to him before. Like the voices would do that. And I asked him, I said, what the hell was that? And he goes, that was them. I said, them who? The voices? And he goes, yeah, the voices. I said, what in the blazes were they doing? He said, they were trying to scare you off. And I said, well, they did a damn good job of it. So I said, you looked really strange as you got up and you left. I mean, I'd never seen you like that before. And I said, what were the voices telling you as you left my office? He said, they were telling me to go get a shank and stick it in your gut.
Wow.
Whoa.
And I was thinking, he wouldn't do that. I've been working with him for 6 months. He wouldn't do something like that. And I said, well, why didn't you do it? He said, well, I couldn't find one and nobody would give me one. And I'm like,
Jeez.
whoa, and it was like, hey, what you're doing is dangerous,
Yeah.
And it was like I cracked the door open to psychosis and I stuck one foot in there and I still had the other foot in normal reality, but I couldn't talk to anybody about what I was seeing in this other
Mm.
reality other than
Yeah.
other schizophrenics.
Mm.
I could talk to them about it, virtually any of this stuff, because they'd experienced a lot of it. So it was like two different worlds, you
Yeah.
know, and I didn't know the rules for this other world. I didn't
Yeah.
know where it was going. I didn't know what these voices were. I didn't know what the crackling was. I didn't know how dangerous it was. And there were periods of time where I felt like I was going nuts,
Mm.
because I couldn't talk to anybody in the normal world about this. I told some stuff to my wife, and she's like, "You shouldn't be messing with these crazy
Right.
people that are criminally insane people. What the hell's the matter with you?" Next time I thought,
Yeah.
okay, I can't tell her anything. It scares the big dickens out of her.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, and
um,
especially back then, like it wasn't like now it's very much talked about like the spirit world. And even if it is sort of less in the mainstream, it's more widely accepted. And the way we talk about energy now, the way we understand energy and how different energy forms can exist, in the form of entities and stuff. Like back then, that was just not talked about ever.
no, no, and I certainly couldn't talk to any of the other psych staff about it. They couldn't
Mm,
stand being with schizophrenics for more than 20 minutes. They'd
Hmm.
bring them in for
yeah.
their monthly check. If they were on their meds, they'd let them go again. Sometimes I spent 3 or 4 hours in there with them. I was fascinated with what the voices were saying. You
Hmm.
know,
Mm,
matter of fact, I have a transcript here. So what this guy was a career criminal. He was using a lot of cocaine, and he was in San Diego, California. He had a rap sheet like 2 pages long,
wow.
and I was working with him for probably 3/4 of a year, and he did recover fully from schizophrenia, fully.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
But his story, one of the things when I was asking him about his voices, he said that one day he was in San Diego, and the voices told him, "We know where there's a pot field in Oregon. He had like $250. He said, take your $250 and jump in your car, go get 2 burlap sacks and a machete, and we'll show you where it's at." So he does that. He's in Southern California. He drives all the way up to Oregon, and here's these voices telling him where to turn. He's listening to them, and he's driving the car, and he's going where they're telling him to go. So a day or two later, he ends up on this 23-mile dirt road heading for the mountains in the middle of nowhere. And their voices are telling him, stay on this road. The road ends, and he goes, okay, what now? The voices tell him, well, get your burlap sack and get your machete. And there's a hiking trail off to your left. Just go off to your left for a while and get on that hiking trail and just stay there, you know. And it's a good way up the mountain, and just keep going. Take your machete and your burlap sacks, and he did. And a few hours later, he comes across this giant sesamolia pot field, acres and acres of pot, and he goes, "Wow!" And he gets his machete, fills up both those burlap sacks, and he asks the voices, says, "Okay, what do I do now?" And they said, there's a federal park, right down the road. Go sell it there. So he goes to that park, and there was a park right where they told him, and he starts selling his pot, and he makes a ton of money. So he buys all the alcohol he can stand. He buys all the cocaine he wants, and he buys all the prostitutes he wants. And then it gets even weirder. He said the voices were fishermen. They wanted to go fishing. And I said, "Oh, come on now." He goes, "Yeah, honest to God, they wanted to go fishing." He said, "I went and bought fishing gear, and I went out to the Columbia River, and here's all these fishermen fishing, and the voices were telling me where to throw my hook, when to move, and how long to stay there." And he said he was the only one on the river catching fish that day.
Oh my
Wow.
God.
And he said he did that for like 3 weeks, and then he finally ran out of pot again. He said, "I got to go back up there and get some more pot. I'm out of money. I'm getting low on money." The voices told him, no, you can't go back up there. They know you've been stealing from them. You go up there, they're going to kill you. They're waiting for you. So the voices told him, get in your car and drive back to San Diego. So
Yeah.
Wow.
here's a transcript of when I was working with him. It was in 2002. He says, the voices have started coming back once a day now. I can feel them in the wings. They start off by whispering, how are you? So what happened is he's getting better and better. These things are staying away longer and coming less often. Okay. So it was another pattern I noticed. So they have to know what these things are, that these are entities, because the voices convince them that what they're hearing in their heads are their own thoughts.
Yeah.
That's what they want them to think. As a matter of fact, I had a number of prisoners ask these voices, who are you? What are you? And they would say, we are you.
Yeah.
And that was another experiment I did that got pretty wacky. It was almost as weird as the one with the Nazi guy. It was just as bizarre, but it showed
Yeah.
that the voices sound, for the most part, just like all the other thousands of voices that you hear in your head every night, every day. It's not like we are the voices. They sound just like the regular
Yeah.
jargon that you're listening to every day. But their intention is very different.
Yeah.
And their content is very different. So he said they start out by whispering, so he can feel them. Before he even hears them, he can feel them. And I asked him, well, what did you do? He said, I completely ignore them and I start praying. So I knew by then that they hated the 23rd Psalm. They hated the 91st Psalm. So one of the things I tell them to do was pray. He said, I don't talk to them at all. I totally ignore them. And if you give them any recognition at all, then they put their foot in the door. Right. So he's hearing what they said, and he was letting them go in one ear and out the other. Because if you try to forcibly ignore them, they get louder.
Yeah.
But if you acknowledge, okay, you listen to them and then let them go blow through like the weather, like a cloud, then you're not resisting them. So because what you resist persists. You can't resist them. Just let them blow through.
Wow.
But don't give them any attention, because attention is energy.
Yeah.
They want your attention. I ask them, how long does it take for them to go away once you start praying and asking for help? So I'd tell them to ask their guardian angels for help. Okay. He said about 15 minutes. It took him 15 minutes of praying to get rid of them. And I said, how about the fits they usually throw when you ignore them? Do they go ballistic on you? He says, no. I have to give them the time of day before they can get into throwing their hissy fits. So he has to acknowledge them.
Yeah.
Okay, I hear you. Now get out of here. I don't want to hear anything you have to say. You're liars. And I asked him, do you have a whole lot more peace in your life than you had before? And he goes, yes, much, much more. I said, do you miss the voices? He said, no, not anymore. He used to. Okay.
Yeah.
See, what happens is these people, the voices drive away all human contact. So all there is the voices and them.
Yeah.
Okay. And I had one guy where we got rid of the voices, and he got a job answering the phones for the motor vehicle division. It was one of the jobs they had at the prison. And they transferred me to another unit, but I looked him up before I left, and I asked him, I said, how are you doing with the voices? So he had gotten rid of them. Okay.
Amazing.
But he said he was so lonely that he asked for them to come back, and they did.
Oh, wow.
So when psychiatry said there is no other way to get rid of these things than their drugs, they're full of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have no clue.
There are ways. They have no clue. They're clueless. I said, do you miss the voices? He said, no, not anymore. I used to. They used to be more a part of me than I was. They are the same voices. I said, are they the same voices you were hearing for years? I said, do they change? He said, nope, they're the same ones. They don't change. So a lot of these people are hearing the same voices for years. They're not different ones. Sometimes they change, but not often. I said, how many voices continue to come and visit you now? He said 2. That was down from 3. I asked him, is that the same number as before, or is it less? He said, it's 1 less. I said, was the one who disappeared, was he one of the weaker ones? He said, no, it was the strongest one. And I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, what do you think happened to him? He said, I've been praying on a regular basis now. It seems that the strongest one couldn't stand the constant prayer. He said, have you have you forged a better link with the positive spirits? He goes, yes. The demons try to disguise themselves as good spirits. So they lie about everything. The voices will tell you anything. I said, what do the good spirits do for you? He said, they help me pray when the bad ones come. The prayers get louder inside and overcome the bad voices. I said, what kinds of things do the good ones tell you? He said, they tell me to be appreciative of what I have and I'll get more. They tell me to stay in prayer and to give thanks for what's around me. That's just a snippet of and I got pages and pages of these transcripts like that.
So interesting.
Conversations with these guys and how the voices reacted. But what am I doing now is, after all these years of looking for something that worked with these voices. I mean, when I was doing this stuff, this was like rudimentary stuff. It did work, but it took forever. It took a long time. It took a lot of work, but it came to the attention of the chief psychologist that these guys were being cured. And I thought he would be happy about it. Now, I wasn't going to tell him because I didn't trust him, and what I was doing was not conventional psychology at all. So I didn't trust him. But it got to the point where these guys were recovering and they were telling the psychiatrist that they didn't need their drugs anymore, that they were okay. And he didn't believe him. And somehow it got to the chief psychologist, and the chief psychologist was upset that I was doing something that
was
these
working.
guys were recovering, that was working. And he wasn't happy about it. He was upset.
Yeah.
And it was like, he's doing something that's I don't have control of, and the department probably won't approve of, because who knows what it is.
Yeah.
So he sent one of his stooges down to investigate me, and he was talking to the patients who had recovered. So there was a handful that recovered fully. One of them had an MMPI when he came into the prison, which is the gold standard psych test, stating that this guy was psychotic. Right? So he pulled that guy in the office, and the prisoners knew what he was up to, and they wouldn't tell him anything. The ones who completely got rid of the voices. So this stooge was questioning him, like, what is he doing in there? What are you doing in the office? What's he doing? And the prisoner said, he's helping him, not like you asshole. That flared the guy. He just flared him.
Yeah.
And he said, well, would you be willing to take another MMPI? And the prisoner said, yeah, I'll take another MMPI. So he took it. So he had, the first MMPI was valid, okay? And it showed that this guy was psychotic as bedbug. He gave him the second MMPI, and it showed that he was not psychotic any longer.
Wow.
This was their golden test. So when the chief psychologist found out about that, he started turning up the gas. He's sending these guys out, asking all these guys, what's he doing with you? What's he doing with you? What's he doing with you? And they wouldn't tell him anything, which frustrated him even worse. So,
I can imagine.
So he pulled an inquisition. He said, okay, well, I'm going to bring you up before the chief medical officer, and we're going to question you. But they didn't have anything. They really didn't have anything, because none of the prisoners told them anything. So when they pulled me up there, they were asking me in front of the chief medical officer. They had already told him that he's doing something, and these guys are going off their meds, and that they're going off their meds because they don't need them anymore, and they didn't. So I didn't tell him anything. I said, well, I'm just talking to him. I mean, well, I didn't give him anything. And they were even more furious that the chief medical officer didn't do anything to me. And basically the chief medical officer said, you need to listen to your boss, or you're going to be in trouble. And he told the boss, said, if he's doing something that is helping these guys, leave him alone. That
Yeah.
infuriated him even more.
Oh,
So he stayed off my back for a year until that guy, the chief medical officer, left and went somewhere else. And then he was on me like a duck on a June bug again.
Yeah.
It just speaks volumes about the medical system, doesn't it? Because it's not a healthcare system, it's a sick care system, and keeping people unwell and keeping them medicated is what makes them money. They have no interest in people getting better.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And they're making billions of dollars a year with that money.
Yeah.
And they select and elevate people that are incentivized to keep the status quo.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they pick the right personality types to hold those positions of power that don't want to make waves. They don't want to go outside the lines. They just want to paint inside the colored boxes,
Yeah.
Yep. And if they make waves, then they're in trouble. You don't question them.
Yeah, exactly.
So here I am with, doing this. This is kind of like, the stuff I was doing back then is kind of primitive to what I'm doing now. So I ran into something called the MACE Energy Method, which was an energetic psychotherapy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I heard about it, and people are saying it worked. So I went and I got all the books I could find on it, and I read it, and it intuitively fit. It's like this guy's on to something. I mean, I could see it. He was on to something. So I was able to piece together just from those books how to use that system in a rudimentary fashion, and it was working. So it dealt with energy, because your spirit is energy, your thoughts are energy, your feelings are energy, your memory is energy, everything's energy. Now these negative entities, they could go into the person's mind and they could pull up every rotten thing they ever did and throw it in their faces to make them feel like crap. So they were energy also. So this guy was on to something. What was going on was energetic and spiritual. It wasn't physiological.
Yeah.
Wow.
I already knew it, But to work with energy was something that I'd never had any dealings with, But I'm seeing that's the right direction.
Can I ask, Jerry, because the first time I'd ever heard of MACE Energy Method was listening to one of your interviews, and of course I looked it up. I was intrigued, and from what I read about it, it's because I work with a modality called PSYCH-K. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's similar to MACE in that a lot of the processes are underpinned by NLP principles, so neuro-linguistic programming. So just in terms of the process and how it works, like what are you doing with people?
Well, what Mace found was that the mind, now Mace, who came up with this, John Mace, he wasn't a psychologist or psychiatrist or social worker. I mean, he eventually got his master's degree, I believe, but he was a ship captain. He drove these big freighters back and forth across the ocean. So he had to know about energy, he had to know about magnetism, he had to know about how energy flowed. And he was very curious about how the mind worked. And he found that the mind doesn't work like we're taught it does. He said what the mind does is take pictures of where you put your attention. And your attention carries energy. Where you put your attention, you're giving your energy to. Right?
Yeah.
And what he found was that virtually all psychological illnesses come from some kind of trauma. They all originate in some kind of trauma. And on this planet, nobody escapes trauma. I mean, everybody undergoes. This is a rough planet to live on.
Yeah.
You're going to get traumatized. If you're here, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
So what he found was what happens is when you hit a trauma, you have this really bad feeling, and it stays there forever. It just won't go away. Right? And it's just tormenting you for weeks. And then at the same time as that trauma happens, you make a decision in a traumatic state about what part you played in that trauma and why that trauma happened to you. You don't make good decisions when you're in a traumatic state. They're always bad decisions. So what happens after that bad feeling torments you for a long enough time, the ego shows up and goes, okay, let me handle this. And it takes that trauma and that decision and it throws it into the subconscious mind and it locks it down. So you're no longer aware of it.
Yeah.
Okay? So what they say is, with time, all things heal. Yeah, no, you're not healed. It's still there. Okay.
Yeah.
It's in the subconscious. It's a big pool of negative energy. And it's like a computer virus that runs in the background, only it's a mind virus. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's affecting your waking life. It affects what you do, what you don't do, what you think, what you don't think, your decisions, your attitude toward life. And kind of the way it operates is like, everybody has this one kind of jerk that no matter where you go, that kind of jerk shows up.
Yeah.
Right. You can go from here to China and a Chinese jerk like that will show up. So what that is this negative, what they call it, a negative identity that is now buried in your subconscious, sitting there like a landmine, waiting to be triggered by these jerks that just kind of float in every once in a while. And then that button is pushed and that thing goes off like a landmine. And it tells you to either attack that jerk or run from that jerk or avoid that jerk. And it keeps happening over and over and over again. And it disrupts your relationships with your bosses and other people, or it depends on how close that jerk is to the jerk who traumatized you.
Yeah.
So if he's real close, that thing really blows up. I mean, if they're half close, it halfway blows up and makes you uncomfortable, but it's going to affect you every time one of those guys show up. And it's sitting there waiting, just like a landmine, waiting for one of those jerks to come up and trigger it. Now that jerk is often a parent, or a relative, or somebody close to you, or somebody who molested the person or did bad stuff to them. Somebody like that. So that thing's just sitting there waiting, and it goes off automatically. So what MACE found was that energy flows from negative to positive. So spirit is positive. Now MACE has a spiritual component, and it doesn't work without it, but it's seldom mentioned. But that's the active ingredient. So what MACE actually does is builds a bridge between this negative identity and the negative energy and the spirit. Okay, so it starts a energetic flow from this negative energy to the spirit, and the spirit doesn't destroy that negative energy; it transposes it to positive energy. Okay?
Wow.
And this is done with the attention. So the person's attention is like the conduit. It's like the pipeline. Okay, and they have to hold their attention on that negative thing. Okay. And then it will be drawn down to the spirit, and the spirit will get rid of it. And after you're done, it could be the worst trauma in the universe, and you ask them, okay, go back to that trauma. How do you feel about it now? And they go, it's gone. It doesn't affect me anymore. They remember the trauma, but and it happens within an hour. So I have these old people that are 75, 80 years old. Something happened to them when they were a kid at 5 or 6 years, 7 years old, and they decided that they were worthless because of whatever happened to them back then. Their mom scolded them or beat them or did something to them, and they made that decision that they were worthless, and it stays there, and it's running in the background. So even though they know they're not worthless, they feel it.
Yeah.
Okay. So they can convince them, oh, I know I'm not worthless, but they feel it. And it destroys their entire life, and that's what they call the rune. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and the MACE will go in there, and inside of an hour, it's gone. They feel more energy. They feel lighter. They feel more grounded. They feel clearer. I've had guys kind of look around and go, everything looks brighter in an hour.
That's
and
incredible.
It's gone permanently.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's almost like magic.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
spectacular.
incredible.
So I have some videos on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com on the MACE Energy Method. So you can go there and you can take a look at it. There's about 100 of us on the planet right now. They're growing, but they went to it was developed in Australia.
Yeah, I saw
really?
that when I first. Yeah, the guy that Mace is from here. I think he's in
Okay.
Sydney.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, mate. Yeah.
He's from there. I had this out of nowhere after I'm reading this stuff, and I'm basically kind of using it in a rudimentary manner because they don't give you the details in the books. And this guy contacts me had no idea who he is. And he goes, I got somebody you need to meet. And he goes, at worst, she'll be this jolly old lady. And I'm like, and this is coming over the email. And I look at that and I go, well, that's very different from the kind of emails I usually get.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I wonder what that's all about. So here's something in me saying, well, look into it. Contact that guy back and see what's going on with this jolly old lady. So I contact him back, and he puts me in touch with Cherie Hatfield, the chief training officer for MACE.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Out of nowhere. I had no idea who this lady was. I had no idea who was this guy. I mean, it was like spirit was working through this thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So here I am in touch with the chief training officer for MACE. And we're going round and round and round. And, I'm like, well, that's a lot of money you want for that. I'm like, why should I pay you all that money when it's working for me now based on what MACE wrote? She goes, well, that's just the tip of the iceberg, So I went through the training and got the advanced training, and man, it works better than anything I've seen in my over 45 years on the front lines. It works better than any of these counseling theories. It works better than NPR, the I thing, the I thing. It works better than hypnosis, and the results are permanent. The psychological problem is gone. Now, with schizophrenia, it has a harder time. With people who aren't too far gone, it works great. With people who are moderate, it sometimes works. It may get rid of the voices sometimes, but it will get rid of the trauma that the voices feed off of.
Yeah.
And with people who are really far gone, very psychotic, now they're too far gone.
Yeah.
But it does better than anything else I ever seen. Yeah. And it produces permanent results. You're not just treating the symptoms anymore, you're treating the cause.
It's amazing. And no drugs, no drugs. Constant visits for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And then potentially, like we've been exploring, is how these things are also potentially passed on energetically, like through children and grandchildren and all that. You're not saving that for later. No, it is. They definitely passed on, especially with schizophrenic parents. It's not a genetic thing. That's what the psychiatric mafia and Big Pharma was saying to start with. They go, oh, it's genetic. And then the geneticists finally, after 10 years, finally catch up with it and go, hey, we're not seeing it. We don't see a gene for schizophrenia. So they go, well, it's not one gene. It's a whole bunch of genes, and they're all mixed together like this, and we'll eventually find it. It's in the
we
junk
know it's
DNA.
Genetic. So here they are with their bull crap again. They're kicking it up where you can't see it. You can't. So we're the experts, and we're telling you this. You got to trust us. Bull crap, you got to trust us. After the pandemic, I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. I got trusted them to start with.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the trauma point, and because I was going to ask you, and I'm pretty sure I already know the answer, but this is, from my understanding, what I've learned a lot more about this over the last few years. And my understanding of it now is that these entities that's where they get their hooks in, is the trauma. And I've seen it firsthand I've got a cousin who, very sad story. She was molested as a child and by someone in her family. And then when she got to around the age of 16, she smoked pot heavily for about 2 years, went into a drug-induced psychosis at around the age of 18 and is now diagnosed schizophrenic. She's been on medications for years. And that's how I know the medications don't work, because she's been on meds for years and she still speaks to the voices. She just doesn't get really agitated. Like you said, it's like this tranquilizer. And that was going to be my question. Like, have you ever worked with anyone, like any schizophrenics that haven't experienced severe trauma? Because that seems to be the common denominator with that. Yeah, it is the common denominator. There's some where it just appears, but that's very rare. I'd say 95% of the time there's some kind of trauma there. And with people, girls who are molested, MACE works great. They'll remember what happened, but the emotional trauma is gone.
And that's the way it is with most of the traumas. They'll remember what happened. And at the end of the session, you go, okay, now go back to where that trauma happened. How do you feel about it now? And they go, well, I remember it, but it's okay. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, that's incredible. Actually, and another question I have, because just again, speaking from that experience that I witnessed sort of firsthand, like a lot of the patients you've worked with, are drugs also like very common? Is that also something that kind of opens them up even more to these entities coming in? Yeah.
Yes, especially amphetamine.
Yeah,
Amphetamine
right.
is very dangerous. It just opens up the spiritual protection, like cutting a suit of armor open with a can opener. I mean, it just, the prisoners used to call meth the devil's drug, you know, and it's very dangerous. It's much more dangerous than, I've seen more people go psychotic on meth than any other drug.
Yeah.
I mean, some go psychotic on cocaine, but meth is the big one.
Yeah.
And it was really strange because these things get in, and I've heard prisoners tell me, you know, number of them, not just one or two, a bunch of them, where the voices would tell them when they ran out of meth, they would tell them where to go and when to be there, and somebody would just appear out of nowhere with the meth and give them some more.
Wow.
Jeez.
They'd sell them some more, you know, over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So meth. A lot of times, you know, people will use marijuana and alcohol to try to cope with the voices.
Yeah, right.
And
to kind of like numb the voices out almost. But I imagine it would make it worse.
Well, you know, I've talked to a number of them that smoke marijuana, and the voices from the ones I talked to said the voices didn't like marijuana because it calmed them down. They don't want them calmed down. They want them upset.
Yeah.
But there's other people who smoke marijuana that they're kind of on the fence anyway. They're very unstable. Marijuana will push them over.
Yeah, right.
And alcohol, I mean, alcohol does make things worse. So it may dull them to start with. I mean, so they're high and they're drunk, but then there's this low key nervous agitation that happens with every ounce of alcohol you drink. There's a 10-hour low key withdrawal, and that builds up, and that feeds the voices. So, and the voices don't want these people taking those medicines either. You know, they'll tell them these drugs are poison. Look what they're doing to you. You know, why don't you take something that makes you feel good, like alcohol or cocaine or heroin or something that feels good? Why are you taking these garbage drugs that make you feel awful? You know, if you got to take a drug, take something that makes you feel good.
Yeah, yeah.
It has less side effects.
More pleasant side effects.
Yeah. Wow.
It's
well,
wild.
Thank you so much for your time, Jerry. I just find this so fascinating, and I'm so grateful. You're such a pioneer in this field, because I mean, you were doing this long before this stuff was being talked about more openly.
And you've documented it, which we're super grateful for. I can't wait to read. I haven't read your book yet. I'm going to go snatch it.
Oh, where can we find that? Please let our audience know. You've mentioned your website a few times, but where can we get your book? And if people want to work with you, you're just doing MACE Method now, aren't you?
Yeah, that's the only thing I saw that works. So they can contact me over my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. And this is the book you're talking about.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to get our hands on that.
So, an amazing journey into the psychotic mind. So that's how when we found out what these things were, we figured we got to let people know about this. I mean, because the psychiatric mafia is lying to them. They're misleading them. They're telling them these are hallucinations, and they've done no research on it at all. None. You know, it's just like the old Egyptian priests of old. We hereby declare that they're hallucinations because we said so.
Yeah.
Right. And that's probably what their entities told them to say.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, Jerry. This has been such a fascinating conversation, and I think a lot of people are going to be very interested to hear this if they haven't heard you already. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for tuning in to the Natural AF podcast, where we explore holistic healing modalities, mindsets, and methods that reconnect us to nature and our natural state of being.
If something resonated, share this episode and see the show notes for our guest links, as well as all of our discount codes for our aligned affiliates and Natural Art Form, where we handcraft a range of organic, natural remedies to help support your body's natural healing abilities and help support the show.
If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please take a few seconds to leave us a rating and review. And if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, hit the like button and drop us a comment, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for the latest updates.
We're not here to conform, we're here to remember what's real. So step into your power, be curious, and be natural AF.